I am Sienna, 28 years old, and currently standing in the sterile marble-floored lobby of the most expensive VIP maternity ward in Los Angeles. My husband is upstairs. He is holding the hand of his mistress Chloe, who is currently in labor with his child. For 5 years, I played the role of the dutiful, quiet wife to a man who despised my working-class roots, enduring the endless cruelty of his family. I scrubbed floors to put myself through college, built a silent fortune, and kept my mouth shut. Today they think they have finally broken me. They think I am here to weep and beg. They have no idea that I just finalized the acquisition of the holding company that owns this very hospital, and their generational wealth is currently evaporating into thin air. Before continuing this story of my ultimate revenge, let me know where you started reading in the comments below. And please hit that like and subscribe button if you have ever faced family members who severely underestimated your true worth. You really have no shame, do you? Standing here in last season's bargain rack shoes, while the mother of my future grandson is upstairs doing the real work. The shrill, echoing voice of my mother-in-law, Vivian, sliced through the quiet ambiance of the VIP hospital lobby. She marched toward me, her designer heels clicking sharply against the polished Italian marble. Her fingers, heavy with inherited diamonds, clutched a pristine leather handbag. She looked me up and down, her lips curling into a sneer of absolute disgust. "I belong here just as much as anyone else, Vivian," I said, keeping my voice perfectly level. I refused to give her the satisfaction of seeing my hands tremble. "You belong in the service elevator, Sienna," Vivian hissed, stopping inches from my face. "You have always been nothing but a gold-digging charity case. My son only married you to rebel against his father, and now he is finally fixing that mistake. Chloe is upstairs giving him a true heir. She comes from the Montgomery family, a lineage of actual substance, not some trailer park in Ohio. She is giving my son a child, something your defective working-class body apparently could not manage." The sheer venom in her words was meant to break me. A year ago, it absolutely would have. I would have run to the parking garage and cried until my eyes swelled shut. Not today. Today I simply adjusted the strap of my bag and offered her a cold, empty smile. "Chloe is certainly giving him something," I replied smoothly. "But we both know this hospital wing costs $10,000 a night. Is Marcus paying for that with the joint account, or are you covering the mistress's medical bills?" Vivian's perfectly contoured face flushed a deep, furious crimson. "How dare you speak about financial matters? You do not contribute a single dime to the Sterling family legacy." "Marcus froze your credit cards this morning, by the way. He wanted to make sure you could not drain his accounts in a fit of hysterical, low-class vengeance. You have nothing. You are nothing. Chloe is moving into the main estate by the end of the month, and you will be packing your cheap polyester bags." "Is that the grand plan?" I asked, tilting my head. "It is the reality," Vivian snapped, crossing her arms. "Chloe is a sophisticated, educated woman who knows how to host a charity gala and manage a household budget without clipping coupons. When she demanded this specific VIP suite for the delivery, Marcus did not hesitate. He booked the entire floor. That is how a real man treats a woman of high value. Not that you would understand. I am honestly shocked you even had the cab fare to get here." She laughed, a sharp, grating sound that drew the attention of a nearby security guard. But the guard did not approach us to reprimand her. He caught my eye, recognized my face from the confidential memo distributed to the hospital's senior staff just 20 minutes prior, and gave me a subtle, respectful nod. Vivian, completely oblivious to the exchange, continued her tirade. "So why are you here, Sienna? Hoping for a handout, waiting to beg Marcus for a settlement? You signed a prenuptial agreement, you little fool. You walk away with exactly what you brought into this marriage. Absolutely nothing." I looked past her shoulder, watching the numbers on the brass elevator dial slowly descend. "I am not here for a handout, Vivian. I am actually here to handle some administrative paperwork." "Administrative paperwork?" She scoffed, rolling her eyes toward the vaulted ceiling. "What are you going to do? Apply for a janitorial position? They have some spills upstairs in the maternity ward. Perhaps you could make yourself useful." I did not flinch. I did not raise my voice. I simply reached into my bag and pulled out a crisp, sealed envelope bearing the hospital's executive crest. I tapped it lightly against the palm of my hand. You see, Vivian Marcus might have frozen the joint checking account that held my grocery allowance, but he clearly forgot to check the ownership records of his own startup capital. Did he ever mention who anonymously funded his tech company 3 years ago when the banks refused his loans? He said an angel investor saved him, Vivian replied, her arrogant smirk faltering slightly. I am no angel, I whispered, stepping closer to her frozen form. I am the majority shareholder, and as of 10 minutes ago, I officially foreclosed on his defaulted loans. He is bankrupt, Vivian. Your son is entirely broke. Furthermore, this hospital is now my property. Her jaw dropped, rendering her speechless. She stared at me with wide, horrified eyes, desperately trying to comprehend the total collapse of her carefully curated, arrogant world. The silence between us stretched heavy and deeply satisfying. Enjoy the VIP suite, I smiled. The eviction notices arrive tomorrow. Vivian blinked, the heavy layers of her expensive foundation cracking as her face contorted into a mask of pure disbelief. She stared at the sealed envelope in my hand, then up at my face, searching for a trace of a bluff. Finding none, she let out a harsh, breathless scoff, her manicured fingers tightening around her designer handbag until her knuckles turned white. You are bluffing, Vivian snapped, stepping forward, though the trembling in her voice betrayed her forced confidence. Marcus would never allow some Ohio nobody to control his capital. You have spent the last 5 years polishing silverware and alphabetizing the pantry. You do not have the intellectual capacity to orchestrate a corporate takeover. You are not Lauren. You will never be Lauren. Ah, Lauren, the beloved wife of his dear brother, the gold standard of the Sterling family. I smoothly unclasped my purse and pulled out my phone, opening the clock application. Lauren brought actual value to this family, Vivian continued, her voice rising in pitch as she tried to regain control of the narrative. When my eldest son married her, she brought generational wealth. She brought a summer estate in the Hamptons, a seat on the museum board, and a trust fund that secured our family investments for the next 3 decades. What did you bring to Marcus, Sienna? You brought a sociology degree from a state school and the lingering smell of the diner you scrubbed floors in. I tapped the screen of my phone, setting a digital timer for exactly 15 minutes. I pressed start. The red numbers began counting down. 14 minutes and 59 seconds. What are you doing? Vivian demanded, her eyes darting to the glowing screen. I am setting a timer, Vivian, I said, sliding the phone back into my pocket while maintaining unwavering eye contact. In exactly 15 minutes, the hospital executive board will freeze all access cards for the VIP maternity wing. I highly suggest you use this time to gather whatever dignity you have left and prepare your son. You are insane, she hissed, though she took a cautious half-step back. You think because you managed to hack into a bank account or forge some documents that you suddenly possess power. When we first met you, you wore a cheap thrift store dress to our private country club dinner. You did not even know which fork to use for the salad course. You sat there mute and terrified while Marcus explained your pedestrian background to our friends. You were a charity project, a naive rebellion. I was observant, I corrected her, keeping my voice perfectly level, while you and your country club friends mocked my thrift store dress. I listened to your husbands complain about their failing commercial real estate portfolios, while you forced me to polish the estate silverware to prove I could be useful. I was listening to Marcus take conference calls on speakerphone, practically begging venture capitalists to overlook his massive liabilities. He was drowning in debt long before he met me, Vivian. Generational wealth is only useful if the generation holding it actually knows how to manage money. Marcus did not. Vivian's mouth opened and closed. She looked around the lobby, suddenly hyper-aware of the security guard who was still standing nearby, watching us with quiet amusement. Lauren's trust fund patched the holes in the Sterling ship for a year. I continued, stepping closer, forcing Vivian to tilt her head up to maintain eye contact. But Marcus was greedy. He wanted his own tech empire. He wanted to be a pioneer. He took out mezzanine loans with exorbitant interest rates. When the banks finally cut him off, he came to the angel investor network I had quietly built during those years. You thought I was just arranging the pantry. You did not have any money, Vivian shouted, her composure fully shattering. You worked double shifts to pay off student loans. You came to us with absolutely nothing. I paid off my student loans in my second year of college by developing an algorithm that optimized supply chain logistics for mid-level retailers, I said calmly. I sold the patent for $6 million when I was 22. I brought that capital into the marriage hidden behind a blind trust. I let Marcus believe he was the provider because his fragile ego demanded it. I played the quiet, submissive housewife because it allowed me to operate completely under the radar. While you were comparing me to Lauren and criticizing my etiquette, I was quietly buying up the debt of every single sterling asset. Liar, Vivian gasped, though her eyes betrayed a dawning, horrifying realization. Check your own portfolio, Vivian, I offered softly. Check the holding company that manages your Hamptons estate. I acquired a controlling interest last Tuesday. You have been living on my charity for the better part of 3 years. I bought this hospital because it is a highly profitable asset, but kicking Marcus and his mistress out of it today is just a delightful personal perk. Chloe is giving birth, Vivian shrieked, panic finally replacing her arrogance. You cannot evict a woman in labor. It is illegal. It is monstrous. Chloe is currently in the observation suite dealing with Braxton Hicks contractions. I corrected smoothly, having reviewed the patient intake logs just before stepping into the lobby. She is not in active labor. She is merely experiencing false alarms, much like the false alarm of Marcus's actual net worth. The hospital staff will safely transport her to a standard public hospital across town. I hear their maternity ward is perfectly adequate for uninsured patients. I checked my watch. The timer was steadily ticking down, 10 minutes remaining. Vivian was hyperventilating now, her chest heaving under her silk blouse. She reached into her bag, frantically searching for her phone. I am calling Marcus. I am calling our lawyers. We will completely destroy you. I smiled at her. Call them. Vivian lunged for her dropped phone, but her fingers betrayed her. The device slipped, clattering against the marble floor with a sharp crack. The screen splintered. She stared at it, her chest heaving, the reality of her collapsing empire sinking in. Before she could retrieve it, the VIP elevator slid open. Marcus stormed out. He clutched his limitless black card, his knuckles white with fury. His designer suit looked rumpled, and his styled hair was out of place. A terrified hospital coordinator trailed behind him, clutching a tablet. I demand to speak to the hospital board immediately, Marcus shouted. Do you have any idea who I am? This card does not get declined. Your terminal is malfunctioning, and I will have your job. Sir, the system states the accounts are completely frozen, the coordinator stammered. Marcus spun around, and his gaze locked onto me. He froze. The arrogant bluster vanished, replaced by genuine confusion, before twisting into a familiar sneer. He marched toward me, ignoring his mother. What are you doing here, Sienna? Marcus demanded. I told security to deny you entry. Chloe is upstairs experiencing terrible stress because the hospital suddenly locked the VIP doors and froze the elevators. Did you cause a lockdown? I did not answer. I calmly reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. The digital timer reached 0. A sharp alarm pierced the tense silence. I let it ring for 3 seconds before silencing it. Time is up, I said softly, smiling at him. Before Marcus could respond, the glass doors swung open. A group walked in with undeniable authority. Leading the pack was Dr. Eris Thorne, the hospital's chief administrator. Flanking him were 2 men in dark suits and a third wearing a windbreaker spelling out Federal Bureau of Investigation. Marcus's attention snapped to the new arrivals. Dr. Thorne, he called out, waving the card. Thank God you are here. Your billing department is a disaster. My card was just declined for Chloe's suite. Fix this immediately and have my ex-wife escorted out. Dr. Thorne did not look at Marcus. He walked straight past him, stopping directly in front of me. He extended his hand with an expression of profound respect. Ms. Sienna, Dr. Thorne said loudly, I apologize for the delay. The board has executed the transfer documents. The security protocols have been overridden per your instructions. The hospital is officially under your control. Marcus dropped his arm. The black card slipped from his fingers and landed on the mat. He stared at Dr. Thorne, his jaw-slack eyes darting between the administrator and me. "What did you just say?" Marcus choked out, stepping forward aggressively. "Are you completely insane, Aris? She is a nobody." "You froze the grocery allowance account, Marcus," I corrected smoothly, "while you were busy booking a $10,000 a night suite for your mistress using funds you did not possess. I was busy executing the foreclosure clauses on your defaulted mezzanine loans." "Foreclosure?" Marcus gasped, the color rapidly draining from his arrogant face. "Those loans were secured. My angel investor guaranteed an extension." "I am the angel investor," I stated flatly. "I built a shell corporation 3 years ago to buy your debt when traditional banks realized your tech company was smoke and mirrors. I gave you the rope, Marcus. You eagerly tied the knot yourself. Your tech company is bankrupt. Your commercial properties are foreclosed. Your wealth is gone." "You cannot do this!" Vivian shrieked. She grabbed her son's arm, violently shaking it. "Marcus, tell her she absolutely cannot do this. Call the family lawyers right now." "He cannot afford our lawyers anymore, Mother," Marcus whispered, his voice completely devoid of its usual arrogant edge. The man in the federal windbreaker stepped forward. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a leather badge holder, flipping it open to display a silver shield. "Marcus Sterling," the federal officer said, "I am Special Agent Miller with the Financial Crimes Division. We have a federal warrant regarding your business operations. It appears you have been using your tech company's capital to illegally fund personal luxury expenses, including the attempted payment for a VIP maternity suite today." Marcus staggered backward against the marble wall. "There is a massive misunderstanding here. I have limitless credit. I can clear all this up." "Your accounts are frozen, Mr. Sterling," Agent Miller continued, gesturing for the two men in suits to flank Marcus. "Every asset tied to your name, your mother's name, and your holding companies has been locked pending a comprehensive federal fraud investigation. You are currently in possession of absolutely nothing." "Chloe," Marcus stammered, his eyes going wide with pure panic. "Chloe is upstairs. She is in labor. You cannot just leave her up there." "She is not in active labor," I reminded him. "She is experiencing Braxton Hicks contractions. Dr. Thorne, has the patient been prepared for transport?" "Yes, Ms. Sienna," Dr. Thorne replied. "Per your directive, an ambulance is waiting at the rear loading dock. The patient, Chloe Montgomery, is being safely transferred to the County General Hospital. Their maternity ward has been notified of her arrival." "County General?" Vivian gasped. "You are sending the mother of my grandson to a public hospital." "It is where uninsured bankrupt individuals go for their medical care, Vivian," I said, offering her a perfectly cold stare. "I strongly suggest you and your son start walking right now. I seriously doubt you can even afford the basic taxi fare." Marcus lunged forward, his face contorted in rage, but the federal agents intercepted him immediately, pinning his arms behind his back. The sharp click of metal handcuffs echoed through the silent lobby. As they began to march my former husband out the doors, his mistress's wealthy father unexpectedly burst through the revolving entrance. The heavy revolving doors of the hospital lobby violently spat out Arthur Montgomery. He was a man accustomed to commanding rooms. His bespoke charcoal suit practically screamed old money. He took one look at Marcus, restrained by two federal agents, and his face contorted into absolute outrage. "What is the meaning of this?" Arthur bellowed, his voice echoing off the marble walls. "Unhand my daughter's new husband immediately. Do you know who I am?" "Arthur, thank God!" Marcus gasped, struggling against the tight grip of the federal agents. "There has been a massive mistake. This insane woman forged documents claiming she owns the hospital and my company. You need to call your legal team right now. She is trying to ruin Chloe's delivery." Arthur marched forward, pulling a solid gold phone from his breast pocket. "I am calling the governor," Arthur threatened, glaring at Agent Miller. "You will all be looking for jobs at a shopping mall by sunset. I highly recommend you put the phone away, Mr. Montgomery." I said, stepping directly into his line of sight. Arthur paused, his eyes narrowing as he finally noticed me standing there. "And who are you supposed to be, the disgruntled former wife? Marcus told me you were a delusional, bitter woman who refused to sign the divorce papers. Move aside before I have you arrested for harassment." I offered him a predatory smile. "Marcus told you a lot of things. He told you his commercial real estate portfolio was entirely unencumbered. He told you he was a suitable match for your daughter. He lied about all of it. But please allow me to properly introduce myself." I reached into my designer bag and pulled out a sleek matte black business card. I held it out between my index and middle finger. Arthur hesitated before snatching it from my grasp. He adjusted his glasses, reading the embossed silver lettering. "You see, Arthur, I am not just an anonymous angel investor who got lucky." I explained, my voice carrying a lethal calm. "I am the lead mergers and acquisitions liquidator for Vanguard Horizon. And as of this morning, Vanguard Horizon has officially consumed every single asset bearing the Sterling family name." The color vanished from Arthur's face. Vanguard Horizon was not a secret in the financial sector. We were a ghost fleet of corporate raiders. We bought distressed debt, dismantled failing empires, and liquidated the remains with surgical precision. To have Vanguard Horizon knocking on your door meant your financial death was an absolute certainty. "Vanguard Horizon," Arthur whispered, the arrogance instantly evaporating from his posture. He looked at Marcus, then back at me, his hands beginning to shake. "You bought his debt." "I bought his debt, his mortgages, and his operational loans," I confirmed smoothly. "Marcus has been running a Ponzi scheme for 2 years using high-interest mezzanine loans to cover his operational costs. When the banks refused to lend him another dime, Vanguard Horizon stepped in. We gave him enough capital to hang himself. Today we kicked the chair out from under him." "Arthur, she is lying," Marcus screamed, his voice cracking with desperation. "She is just a former diner waitress. She does not run a hedge fund. Help me." Arthur slowly lowered his phone. He looked at Marcus, his expression shifting from outrage to pure, unadulterated disgust. "You idiot," Arthur spat. "Vanguard Horizon does not make mistakes. If they are liquidating you, you are already a corpse. You lied to me. You put my family name at risk." "Arthur, please." Marcus begged, tears finally spilling from his eyes. "Chloe is upstairs. She is having your grandchild." "My daughter will be annulling this sham of a marriage by tomorrow morning," Arthur said coldly. He turned his back on Marcus entirely. He looked at me, giving a stiff, respectful nod. "Ms. Sienna, I apologize for the intrusion. Vanguard Horizon has my full cooperation. I will have my daughter transferred to another facility immediately." "A wise decision, Mr. Montgomery," I replied. "The service elevator is available for her departure." Agent Miller gave his men a signal. "Let us go, Mr. Sterling. You have a long day of interrogations ahead of you." Marcus kicked and screamed as they dragged him through the revolving doors. He shouted my name, demanding I fix it, demanding I give him his life back. I watched him go, feeling absolutely nothing but the cool breeze of vindication. The glass doors slid shut, sealing his fate. The lobby descended into a deafening silence. Dr. Thorne and the hospital staff quickly scattered, eager to avoid my gaze. I turned slowly, my heels clicking sharply against the floor. Vivian was still standing by the reception desk. She looked like a ghost. Her designer bag hung limply from her arm. Her chest heaved with shallow, panicked breaths. She had just watched her wealthy son get hauled away in handcuffs and her powerful ally Arthur abandon them in a matter of seconds. "It is over, Vivian," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, yet it echoed perfectly. "Your son is going to federal prison. Your estate is foreclosed. You are entirely ruined." Vivian backed away from me, her hands trembling violently. "No," she gasped, shaking her head. "No, this cannot happen. We are the Sterling family. We do not lose. We have connections, we have resources, we have Lauren." Ah, Lauren, the golden wife to Marcus, the beacon of generational wealth. Vivian scrambled to grab her shattered phone from the marble floor. Her fingers slipped across the cracked glass as she desperately dialed a number. She pressed the phone to her ear, her eyes wide with manic hope. "Lauren, darling," Vivian sobbed. You have to help us. Marcus is arrested. Sienna stole everything. You need to wire bailout funds immediately. She paused, listening, her face suddenly contorting in absolute confusion. Lauren, why are you hiding? Vivian did not know her precious Lauren was already bankrupt and fleeing my audit team. The automatic sliding doors of the hospital lobby closed behind me, cutting off the sound of Vivian's frantic sobbing. I stepped into the humid Los Angeles afternoon, the heavy air a stark contrast to the sterile air-conditioned hospital. My heels clicked a steady, triumphant rhythm against the concrete as I walked toward the VIP parking garage. I pressed the unlock button on my key fob, expecting the familiar chirp of my car. Instead, the screech of tires echoed through the concrete structure. A white Range Rover sped around the corner, crossing 2 lanes before slamming on the brakes diagonally directly behind my sedan, completely blocking me in. The driver door flew open. Lauren stepped out. My sister by marriage was the picture of panicked old money desperation. She wore her signature tennis whites, a diamond tennis bracelet glittering on her wrist, and oversized designer sunglasses pushed back into her perfectly highlighted blonde hair. But the facade was cracking. Her hands shook violently as she slammed the car door and her chest heaved with uneven breaths. "You are not going anywhere, Sienna," Lauren demanded, her voice echoing sharply in the empty parking structure. "I just got a frantic voicemail from Vivian babbling about the hospital and Vanguard Horizon. I do not care what kind of cheap scam you are pulling on Marcus, but you are going to fix this right now." I leaned against the trunk of my car, crossing my arms. "There is no scam, Lauren. Just a very thorough financial audit. You might want to move your vehicle before I have it towed. Then again, the repo men are already looking for it, so towing it might actually save them a trip." Lauren flinched, but quickly masked her panic with a sneer of pure weaponized entitlement. She marched toward me, stopping just inches away, using her height advantage to physically intimidate me. It was the same tactic she had used for 5 years. She was the golden girl from the Connecticut elite, and I was the charity case who did not belong at their country club dinners. "You listen to me, you ungrateful little nobody," Lauren hissed, pointing a manicured finger at my chest. "You think you can just orchestrate a hostile takeover of my family? We are the Sterlings. My maiden name is Kensington. We have connections to the governor, the banking commission, and the state Supreme Court. You are nothing. You are a sociology major who tricked my foolish idiot brother into marriage. You do not understand how generational wealth works." "I understand it perfectly," I replied smoothly, ignoring her pointing finger. "Generational wealth only lasts if the current generation knows how to read a balance sheet. Your husband David apparently skipped that class. How is the commercial real estate portfolio doing, Lauren?" Her eyes darted nervously, a flash of genuine fear breaking through her arrogant mask. She quickly reached into her massive oversized leather tote bag and pulled out a thick stack of legal documents, shoving them roughly against my chest. "I am giving you one chance to make this right," Lauren commanded, her voice shrill and desperate. "These are quitclaim deeds for the Buckhead family estate. You are going to sign away any fabricated rights you claim to have over that property. If you sign this right now, I will personally guarantee that the Kensington family lawyers do not destroy you in federal court. I will save this family, and I will let you walk away with a small, respectable severance package so you can crawl back to whichever trailer park you crawled out of." I let the papers fall from her hands. They scattered across the dirty concrete floor of the parking garage, fluttering around our designer shoes. Lauren gasped, her mouth falling open in sheer outrage at the blatant disrespect. "Pick those up!" she shrieked, her face turning a blotchy red. "Pick them up and sign them immediately. You owe this family. We gave you a life of luxury you could not even fathom. You gave me a front row seat to a masterclass in financial incompetence." I corrected, my voice dropping to a lethal quiet register. "Let us talk about your beloved Kensington generational wealth, Lauren. Did you really think Vanguard Horizon would stop at auditing Marcus? We audit the entire ecosystem. I spent 3 days last month personally reviewing the Kensington Family Trust, the trust that supposedly patched the holes in the Sterling ship. My trust fund is none of your business. she snapped, taking a defensive step back. It became my business when David used it as collateral for a high-risk commercial loan, I stated, watching the remaining color drain completely from her face. A loan that Vanguard Horizon purchased. You see, Lauren, your father drained that trust fund 10 years ago to cover his offshore gambling debts. You brought absolutely nothing into this marriage except a recognizable last name and a closet full of tennis skirts. You are just as broke as Marcus, but you have been pretending to be a billionaire savior to stroke your own fragile elitist ego. Shut up, Lauren whispered, looking frantically around the parking garage as if someone might be listening. Shut your mouth. David would never use my assets. He used them because you demanded a lifestyle he could not afford on his own. I pushed forward, backing her against the side of my car. You demanded the Buckhead estate renovations. You demanded the private jet charters to Aspen. You leveraged a hollow trust fund, and David took out fraudulent loans to maintain the illusion of your elite status. You looked down on my working-class background, Lauren, but at least I actually earned my money. You just maxed out credit cards pretending to be royalty. Lauren gasped for air. She raised her hand, her palm open, aiming a desperate, violent slap directly at my face. I caught her wrist mid-air, my grip tight and unyielding. I pushed her arm away. Lauren stumbled backward, her designer heels catching on the uneven concrete of the parking garage. She caught her balance against the side of her white Range Rover, her chest heaving as she stared at me with wide, furious eyes. She rubbed her wrist where my fingers had clamped down a stark red mark already forming on her pale skin. For a moment, the silence between us was filled only by the distant hum of traffic outside the hospital structure and the erratic, shallow rhythm of her breathing. The pristine, untouchable facade of the Kensington heiress was completely gone, replaced by a frantic, cornered woman realizing the walls of her hollow empire were finally collapsing inward. "You actually dared to put your hands on me!" Lauren gasped, her voice trembling with a mixture of absolute outrage and disbelief. She pointed a shaking finger at my face. "Do you have any idea what you are doing, Sienna? You think this little corporate stunt makes you our equal? You are nothing but a common working-class nobody. You were incredibly lucky that we even allowed you to sit at our dinner table. We invited you into our country clubs, we let you attend our charity galas, and we gave you a glimpse into a world you could never have dreamed of from your pathetic little diner in Ohio." I leaned comfortably against my car, casually brushing a speck of dust from my jacket sleeve. The sheer desperation in her voice was almost tragic, but I felt absolutely no pity for her. "Are you quite finished, Lauren?" I asked, keeping my tone perfectly conversational, as if we were discussing the weather rather than the total liquidation of her family's assets. "Because your mascara is beginning to smear, and you are starting to sound remarkably like Vivian when she realizes a department store is completely out of her exclusive size." "Do not you dare mock me!" Lauren shrieked, taking a sudden aggressive step forward before seemingly remembering my grip on her wrist and freezing in place. "You do not understand the rules of the society you are trying to destroy. We are the Kensingtons. We built this city. We have lineage, pedigree, and connections that money cannot simply erase. When Marcus brought you home, we all laughed behind your back. You wore those cheap, sensible shoes and did not even understand how to address the household staff. We allowed you to play pretend in our circle because Marcus thought you were a charming little charity case." I offered her a serene, unbothered smile. "It is fascinating, Lauren, to watch you cling so desperately to the illusion of your social superiority, while you are simultaneously blocking my vehicle in a hospital parking garage, screaming like a banshee and begging me to sign away my legal rights on a dirty concrete floor. Is this what Kensington pedigree looks like? Because from where I am standing, it looks remarkably like a severe manic episode driven by total financial ruin." Lauren flinched, the words striking her like a physical blow. She crossed her arms tightly over her chest, a defensive posture that completely betrayed her aggressively spoken words. "I am not ruined," she insisted, though her voice lacked its previous venom, sounding thin and incredibly hollow. "My family has resources. My father will call his banking associates and they will freeze your ridiculous holding company. We will bury you in endless litigation until you are forced to crawl back to the Midwest. I let out a soft, genuine laugh that echoed off the low concrete ceiling. Call them Lauren. Call your father's banking associates. But before you do, you should probably know that Vanguard Horizon already audited their lending portfolios last month. They were the ones who quietly sold us your husband's defaulted mezzanine loans at a steep discount, just to get the toxic liabilities off their own balance sheets. Your father's powerful friends threw David to the wolves the moment they realized his real estate collateral was completely worthless. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. She looked down at the scattered legal documents covering the floor around her designer shoes, the quitclaim deeds she had hoped would miraculously save the Buckhead family estate. She suddenly looked incredibly small, a woman whose entire identity was tied to a bank account that had just been drained to absolute zero. You were so proud of your generational wealth. I continued pushing off my car and taking slow, deliberate steps toward her. I did not raise my voice. I did not need to. The quiet authority of absolute victory was more than enough. You constantly reminded me that I was a guest in your elite world, but your world was built on a foundation of sand-high interest debt and staggering arrogance. You mocked me for working double shifts to pay off my student loans, while you were blindly signing loan guarantees for a husband who was bleeding your empty trust fund dry to buy a private jet share he could not afford. Stop talking, Lauren whispered, pressing her hands over her ears in a gesture so childish it was almost comical. Stop making up these horrible lies. David is a brilliant investor. We just hit a temporary liquidity snag. A temporary liquidity snag, I repeated, shaking my head in mild amusement. Lauren Vanguard Horizon officially seized the Buckhead estate 3 hours ago. The locks have already been changed. The security codes are disabled. If you drive back there right now, you will find my liquidation team inventorying your imported Italian furniture to offset the massive penalties David owes. There is no bailout coming. There is no magical Kensington connection that can reverse a finalized federal foreclosure. She stared at me, her chest rising and falling rapidly as the finality of the situation truly registered in her mind. The microaggressions, the elitist insults, the desperate appeals to her imaginary social standing, all evaporated, leaving behind nothing but pure, unadulterated terror. I reached into my designer tote bag, my movements deliberately slow and methodical to contrast with her mounting hysteria. The heavy, suffocating silence of the parking garage amplified the crisp sound of the thick, textured paper sliding out of a sleek manila folder. I held the stack of legal documents out toward Lauren, offering her the physical manifestation of her destruction. She stared at the papers, as if they were venomous snakes, her hands remaining glued tightly to her sides in pure denial. Read them, I commanded, my voice echoing off the concrete pillars. Or do you need a summary? Lauren swallowed hard, her throat bobbing visibly beneath the diamond necklace her husband had supposedly purchased with his brilliant real estate dividends. She finally reached out with trembling fingers and took the documents from my steady grasp. Her panicked eyes darted across the bold headers, her perfectly manicured nails scraping anxiously against the dense pages. This is completely impossible, she whispered, shaking her head in frantic, desperate denial. My father's trust fund has been firmly established for over 4 decades. It is completely untouchable by anyone. You are fabricating these documents to intimidate me. This is a sick, elaborate joke. It was untouchable until your father made a series of catastrophic investments in commercial real estate, I corrected smoothly. The Kensington Family Trust officially went bankrupt exactly 6 months ago. The Banking Commission quietly flagged the empty accounts, and the formal asset liquidation process began almost immediately. Your father desperately attempted to conceal the devastating losses, leveraging whatever remaining capital he could siphon from his associates. But the massive debt simply crushed him. You have been walking around acting like American royalty, unaware that your kingdom has already been repossessed and sold to the highest bidder. Lauren's face turned a sickening shade of gray. She flipped to the second page, her eyes widening horrifically as she recognized the official seals of the federal bankruptcy courts. Vanguard Horizon continuously monitors distressed assets across the entire eastern seaboard. I continued, taking a deliberate step closer to her shrinking form. When your father's toxic assets hit the private market, no traditional banking institution wanted to touch them. The liabilities far outweighed the actual value. Therefore, my firm swiftly bought their toxic assets for pennies on the dollar. We essentially purchased your family's entire financial legacy for change. You bought my family's debt, Lauren gasped, looking up at me with sheer unadulterated horror. I bought your entire existence, I stated flatly. Lauren's generational wealth is an illusion. You have been recklessly funding your exclusive country club memberships, your imported designer wardrobes, and your extravagant international vacations using fraudulent lines of credit secured by a trust fund that currently contains absolute zero. You looked down on my background while you were essentially stealing to maintain a hollow lifestyle. You are poorer than the waitstaff you regularly insult at your fancy charity galas. Your reality is entirely fabricated. Lauren backed away in terror, pressing her spine heavily against the driver's side door of her gleaming white Range Rover. She looked exactly like a trapped animal, desperately searching for a non-existent escape route from the absolute wreckage of her life. My husband will fix this immediately, she stammered, though the profound lack of conviction in her trembling voice was genuinely pathetic. David is a financial genius. He will call his private investors and effortlessly raise the necessary capital to buy back the family debt. You are simply just a bitter former wife trying to cause temporary trouble for us. I laughed, a sharp, genuinely amused sound that easily cut through her delusional rambling. David is currently sitting inside a federal holding cell alongside Marcus. Did Vivian somehow forget to mention that extremely important detail when she called you in a panic? The federal authorities executed a highly coordinated raid this morning. Your husband and his brother have been running a synchronized corporate Ponzi scheme, moving hollow assets back and forth to artificially inflate their portfolios. David absolutely cannot save you right now, Lauren. He currently cannot even afford to legally save his own miserable skin from federal prison sentences. The heavy papers slipped from Lauren's shaking hands, scattering across the gray concrete floor for a second dramatic time. She gripped the metal handle of her expensive car door, her knuckles turning completely bone-white as she frantically tried to pull it open. I am leaving immediately. She choked out her rapid breathing, becoming horribly ragged and dangerously uneven. I am calling my family lawyers right now. I am driving straight home, and I am calling the absolute best legal defense team in the entire state to sue you for this harassment. I simply smiled at her pathetic, empty threat. I casually reached out and placed my hand firmly over hers, effectively stopping her from opening the heavy door. The polished metal handle was icy cold, but her clammy skin was absolutely freezing. I would not highly recommend driving this particular luxury vehicle today, Lauren, I stated softly. You see, your leased Range Rover is scheduled for repossession tomorrow. According to the Vanguard Horizon primary audit team, this vehicle was leased under the Kensington Holding Company. That specific company permanently defaulted on its final bank loan payment 3 weeks ago. You no longer own this beautiful luxury car. Lauren stared blankly at the pristine white hood of the expensive vehicle, her entire delicate body violently trembling under the crushing weight of her shattered false reality. The aggressive repossession agents have already officially filed the necessary legal paperwork with the local city police department. I explained, maintaining a perfectly level, detached tone. The custom license plate is currently flagged. If you foolishly pass a single patrol car on your long way back to your foreclosed mansion, you will certainly be arrested on the spot for grand theft auto. You truly have absolutely nothing left in this entire world, Lauren. The sudden silence in the concrete parking structure was deafening, broken only by the sharp, ragged sound of Lauren gasping for air. Her perfectly manicured hands flew to her face, pressing hard against her cheeks, as if trying to physically hold her shattered reality together. It did not work. The dam broke. A guttural, agonizing sob ripped from her throat, echoing off the cold gray walls. She sank slowly to her knees, disregarding the dirt and oil stains that immediately soaked into the pristine white fabric of her designer tennis skirt. The untouchable Kensington heiress, the woman who had spent 5 years treating me like a disease she might accidentally catch, was now weeping uncontrollably at my feet. I stood perfectly still, watching her complete and utter disintegration. There was no joy in this specific moment, but there was a profound, settling peace. I watched as her oversized sunglasses slipped down her nose, falling onto the concrete with a pathetic clatter. She did not even attempt to retrieve them. Instead, she reached out with trembling fingers, desperately grabbing the hem of my tailored jacket. "Please," Lauren begged, her voice thick and distorted with crying. "Please, Sienna, you cannot let them take the house. You cannot let them take the cars. David will leave me. My friends will completely abandon me. I will be an absolute laughingstock in this city. I will have absolutely nothing." I looked down at her grasping hands, then calmly stepped back, forcing her to let go. "You already have nothing, Lauren. You have had nothing for years. You just lacked the basic mathematical comprehension to realize it. Do not beg me to save a lifestyle you actively stole to maintain." "I will do anything," she wailed, her mascara running in dark, jagged streaks down her flushed cheeks, ruining her flawless makeup. "I will publicly apologize to you. I will host a dinner and invite all the country club members and tell them how brilliant you are. I will make sure everyone in our circle accepts you. Just give us back the Buckhead estate. I will make you the queen of our social calendar." Her absolute delusion was staggering. Even now, completely bankrupted and kneeling on a dirty garage floor, she honestly believed her social currency held tangible value. She truly thought an invitation to a miserable country club dinner could be traded for a multi-million-dollar real estate foreclosure. "Lauren, your circle is entirely bankrupt," I stated, making sure my pronunciation was crisp and echoing in the empty space. "Your friends are currently leveraged to the breaking point, drowning in the exact same toxic mezzanine loans that destroyed your husband. Vanguard Horizon is auditing 3 of your closest friends next week. There will be no country club dinners because none of you will be able to afford the monthly membership dues. I do not want your apologies, and I certainly do not want your pathetic social acceptance. I want you to face the exact reality you created." She collapsed fully against the side of her repossessed Range Rover, curling into a tight, miserable ball. Her cries turned into high, thin keens of pure despair. She hugged her knees to her chest, rocking back and forth. The sheer totality of her ruin had finally crushed the last remaining fragments of her entitlement. She was mourning the death of her false identity, the only thing she had ever truly loved. "You are a monster," she sobbed into her arms, her voice muffled and weak. "I am an auditor," I corrected smoothly, adjusting the strap of my tote bag on my shoulder. "I just balanced the ledgers. You and your family wrote the debts. Today is simply the day the bills came due." I turned away from her sobbing form, feeling the heavy, humid air of the Los Angeles afternoon briefly wash over me from the garage entrance. I had wasted enough time on Lauren. Marcus was currently sitting in federal custody. Vivian was wandering the hospital lobby in a state of penniless shock, and Vanguard Horizon had successfully seized the entire Sterling and Kensington portfolios. The liquidation process was already in motion. My work here was officially finished. I reached for the door handle of my sedan, ready to return to my corporate office, and finalize the hospital acquisition paperwork. Before my fingers could pull the handle, a sharp double vibration buzzed from the pocket of my blazer. I paused, pulling out my encrypted work phone. The screen illuminated, displaying a high-priority secure text message from Jackson, my lead private investigator. I had retained his specialized services 7 months ago to monitor every single movement Marcus made outside of his failing tech company. Jackson was thorough, ruthless, and never contacted me on this specific secure line unless the information was highly critical and immediately actionable. I swiped the screen open. The message contained a single encrypted PDF file with a brief text caption attached beneath it. "Target subject Chloe Montgomery. Observation suite status updated. Post-delivery blood panel rushed through our private lab contacts per your direct authorization. Chloe had apparently delivered the child while I was busy dismantling the family empire in the lobby and the parking garage. The false labor must have rapidly transitioned into active delivery. I tapped the PDF icon, waiting exactly 2 seconds for the decryption software to render the document visible. It was a certified medical laboratory report. My eyes quickly scanned past the standard neonatal health metrics, dropping directly to the mandatory genetic screening section I had secretly paid the lab technicians to expedite. Marcus had spent 9 months parading Chloe around the city, boasting that his mistress was carrying the sterling heir. He constantly weaponized this pregnancy against me, declaring my genetics were the reason we never conceived. I stared at the glowing screen. The blood type results were clearly highlighted. Chloe possessed type O. Marcus possessed type AB. The newborn infant possessed type O. Absolute checkmate, Marcus Sterling. I locked the screen of my encrypted phone, sliding the devastating medical report back into my pocket before stepping into the driver's seat of my sedan. The drive to the Vanguard Horizon downtown headquarters was a blur of calculated silence. I bypassed the marble lobby, swiped my executive access badge, and rode the private elevator up to the penthouse suite. My corner office offered a panoramic view of the Los Angeles skyline, a fitting backdrop for a woman who now owned a significant portion of it. I had barely taken a seat behind my mahogany desk, pouring a glass of sparkling water, when the heavy oak doors of my suite burst open. The sound of shouting echoed from the reception area. "I do not care what your security protocols are," Marcus roared, shoving past my panicked executive assistant. 2 security guards were hot on his heels, their hands hovering over their radios waiting for my command. Marcus looked like a man who had survived a shipwreck. His designer suit jacket was gone, his silk tie was loosened and stained with sweat, and the arrogant confidence that usually radiated from him had been replaced by a manic, desperate energy. He slammed his hands down flat on the polished surface of my desk, leaning over to glare at me with bloodshot eyes. "You have gone completely out of your mind, Sienna." He gasped, his chest heaving. "Call off the federal agents. Fix this right now." I calmly raised my hand, signaling the 2 security guards to stand down and step out of the office, though I instructed them to leave the oak doors wide open. My assistant scurried away, leaving me alone with the man who had spent 5 years treating me like an unpaid servant. I took a slow, deliberate sip of my sparkling water, letting the silence stretch until Marcus pounded his fist against the mahogany wood. "Did you not hear me?" he shouted, his voice cracking with hysteria. "The federal agents just spent 3 hours interrogating me in a holding room. They froze my personal accounts. They seized the servers at my tech firm. They are threatening me with a decade in federal prison for wire fraud." "Wire fraud is a serious federal offense, Marcus," I replied, maintaining a perfectly even tone. "You should probably hire a competent defense attorney instead of harassing a corporate liquidator in her private office." Marcus shook his head violently, running a trembling hand through his disheveled hair. "This is your fault," he hissed, his eyes narrowing as he attempted to regain his old domineering posture. "You orchestrated this entire nightmare because you are a jealous, bitter woman. You could not handle the fact that I finally found a woman of my own social standing. You could not handle that Chloe was giving me the child your defective body could not produce. So you threw a tantrum and destroyed my entire business empire." He paced the length of my office, gesturing wildly toward the glass windows. "I built that tech company from nothing." Marcus lied seamlessly, slipping into his favorite role as the persecuted visionary. "I worked 80-hour weeks while you sat at home doing absolutely nothing. I provided you with a life of luxury. I put a roof over your head and gave you access to high society. And how do you repay my generosity? You hack into my financial records, forge documents, and coordinate a malicious raid with federal agents just to satisfy your pathetic working-class vendetta. You are destroying an innocent man just because your ego is bruised. You are completely toxic, Sienna." I watched him perform his mental gymnastics with a sense of clinical fascination. He truly believed his own fabricated narrative. You did not build a company from nothing, Marcus, I stated firmly, leaning forward, resting my elbows on the desk. You built a house of cards using extremely high-interest loans that you fraudulently secured against phantom assets. I did not forge a single document. I legally purchased your defaulted debt when your own banker friends refused to extend your credit line. I simply audited your ledgers. You destroyed your own empire the moment you decided to steal operational capital to fund your extravagant personal lifestyle. Do not dare project your criminal incompetence onto me. You entrapped me, Marcus accused, pointing an accusing finger directly at my face. You hid your wealth. You lied to me about who you were for 5 entire years. If you had just told me you had millions in capital, I would not have needed those loans. You set me up to fail because you are deeply insecure. You wanted me to go bankrupt so you could finally feel superior. This is all about your pathological jealousy. You targeted Chloe today because you are obsessed with ruining my happiness. You are a sick, manipulative woman, and any judge will clearly see that this entire corporate takeover is just a massive crime of passion orchestrated by a scorned, infertile ex-wife. Yeah, Ma? I stood up slowly, smoothing the wrinkles from my tailored jacket. The sheer audacity of his accusations was staggering yet entirely predictable. He was desperately clinging to his superiority, refusing to accept that the quiet woman he had mocked for years had personally engineered his total financial annihilation. I walked around the edge of my desk, stopping just inches away from his trembling, sweaty form. I did not raise my voice, but the cold authority in my tone made him visibly flinch. His desperate need to maintain control was breaking down right before my eyes, exposing the fragile core he had hidden beneath his expensive suits and hollow boasting. I stared directly into his terrified eyes, savoring the absolute power shift that hung heavily in the chilled air of the expansive penthouse suite. I am not jealous of Chloe, Marcus, I whispered softly, placing the printed medical report directly onto the polished mahogany surface between us. Actually, I truly pity her. Marcus stared at the printed medical report resting on the polished mahogany desk, his bloodshot eyes frantically scanning the highlighted text. The confident sneer he had worn into my office melted away, replaced by a foolish expression of total incomprehension. He read the blood types once, blinked rapidly, and then read them again. His hands began to tremble violently as the biological impossibility registered in his desperate mind. A man with type AB blood could never father a child with type O blood. The infallible heir he had paraded around high society was not his biological son. This is a forgery. Marcus choked out, his voice a hoarse, pathetic wheeze. He snatched the paper from the desk, crumpling the edges in his shaking fists. You hacked into the hospital's private server and fabricated this document just to torture me. Chloe loves me. She comes from a respectable family. She would never betray me like this. I leaned back in my leather chair, steepling my fingers together as I watched his mental collapse. The hospital is my property now, Marcus. I authorized a completely legal expedited genetic screening. That document is a certified medical fact. He dropped the paper as if it had burned his skin. He stumbled backward, his knees hitting the edge of a leather guest chair, and he collapsed into it. The golden boy of the Sterling family looked entirely broken. But the baby, he whispered, staring blankly at the floor. She promised me a son. I felt no sympathy for the man who had spent 5 years mocking my perceived infertility. She promised you a convenient lie, I corrected smoothly. And you were arrogant enough to blindly finance her entire deception using money you had actively stolen. Marcus snapped his head up, his eyes wide with a mixture of grief and fresh panic. I never stole anything, he defended weakly. I just moved operational capital to cover temporary liquidity snags. I pulled a thick black leather binder from my desk drawer and let it drop heavily onto the desk. You embezzled millions, Marcus. While you were accusing me of being a jealous, bitter wife, I was auditing the hidden ledger of your tech company. You siphoned exact amounts from your primary investor funds to finance your extravagant, pathetic affair with Chloe Montgomery. I opened the binder, flipping to a carefully tabbed spreadsheet. Let us review your temporary liquidity snags, I stated coldly. Last October, you withdrew $200,000 from the corporate payroll account. You categorized it as a software development expense. In reality, you used those exact funds to purchase Chloe a diamond necklace and a leased sports car. Marcus flinched visibly, shrinking into the chair. 3 months later, I continued, you diverted another $500,000 from your research and development budget to secure the down payment on that luxury penthouse she currently occupies. You were literally draining the lifeblood of your own company to play the role of a billionaire sugar daddy. I said, my voice sharp and unyielding. You funded her entire lavish lifestyle, her designer wardrobes, her exclusive spa retreats, and her endless string of private vacations. You stole from your own employees, Marcus. You jeopardized the livelihoods of people who actually worked hard, all to impress a woman who was quietly sleeping with another man. He buried his face in his hands, letting out a muffled, agonizing groan. She manipulated me, he cried into his palms. She exploited your massive, fragile ego, I corrected him. You wanted a trophy that reflected your imaginary status. You wanted a woman with generational wealth because you deeply resented my working-class background. You embezzled corporate funds because you could not afford her genuine attention. You bought her loyalty with stolen money, and she repaid your generosity by giving you another man's child. Marcus sobbed, a pathetic, wet sound that echoed loudly in the quiet penthouse office. I have absolutely nothing left, he wailed, rocking back and forth in the chair. My company is ruined. Your company was an elaborate illusion, I stated flatly. You never had the intellectual capacity to run a successful tech empire. You just knew how to wear an expensive suit and lie to venture capitalists. Vanguard Horizon did not destroy you, Marcus. We merely exposed the massive hollow crater you had already dug for yourself. You embezzled your own startup capital, you committed federal wire fraud, and you bankrupted your family's legacy. I closed the black binder with a loud, definitive snap. The federal authorities have a mountain of evidence detailing every single fraudulent transaction. Marcus quickly looked up, his pale face red and heavily streaked with pathetic tears. Please, Sienna, he begged, sliding out of the chair and dropping to his knees on the carpet. You own the entire debt. You can simply call off the federal agents right now. You can tell them it was a misunderstanding. I will sign anything you want today. I will publicly apologize to you. Just please do not ever let them send me to federal prison. I looked down at him, feeling absolutely nothing. The eviction notices for your foreclosed properties are being served right now. Your mother is currently wandering the streets. You made your choices, Marcus, I whispered, pressing a silver button on my sleek desk console to immediately summon the private security guards waiting patiently in the quiet hallway. You chose to repeatedly lie, you chose to blindly steal, and you ultimately chose to treat me like absolute garbage simply because you foolishly thought I was completely powerless. You enthusiastically threw away a fiercely loyal wife just to endlessly fund a manipulative liar's pathetic lifestyle. The heavy oak doors swung open smoothly, and the two broad, powerful guards stepped inside the room, fully ready to forcibly escort the weeping, ruined man out of my pristine building forever. Take him far away, I commanded without hesitation. He currently has a mandatory appointment with the Federal Financial Crimes Division. The heavy oak doors clicked shut, cutting off Marcus's pathetic, echoing pleas for mercy as the security guards dragged him toward the private elevator. I stood alone in the absolute silence of my penthouse office, taking a slow, deep breath of the crisp air. The complete dismantling of my former husband was officially finished, but the final, most satisfying piece of my carefully orchestrated vengeance had not yet been fully delivered. I walked back around my expansive mahogany desk and smoothly settled into my leather executive chair. Before I could reach for my glass of sparkling water, the intercom buzzed. Ms. Sienna. My assistant's voice trembled slightly through the speaker. I am incredibly sorry to interrupt you again, but Mr. Arthur Montgomery just bypassed the lobby security desk. He is demanding to speak with you immediately. He claims it is a matter of profound urgency regarding his daughter, Chloe. I instructed her to send him in my voice radiating absolute tranquility. The door swung open once more, revealing the imposing patriarch of the Montgomery family. Arthur looked significantly worse than he had during our brief encounter in the VIP hospital lobby earlier that afternoon. His charcoal suit was noticeably wrinkled. His typically arrogant face was flushed with a mixture of profound exhaustion and simmering rage. He marched into the center of the room, stopping just short of my desk. He refused to take the guest chair that Marcus had so recently occupied. I just received a call from the County General Hospital, Arthur demanded, his voice thick with furious indignation. My daughter is suffering in a substandard public facility because of your vindictive corporate stunts. You have completely ruined her public reputation by associating her with Marcus's spectacular financial collapse. I came here to officially inform you of my plan. The Montgomery family is filing a massive defamation lawsuit against you and Vanguard Horizon. You might have destroyed that idiot Marcus, but you will absolutely not destroy my daughter. I offered him a cold, serene smile. Please, Arthur, take a seat. I highly suggest you make yourself comfortable because you and I need to have a very candid conversation about your precious daughter. Arthur crossed his arms, his posture rigid with defiance, but he slowly lowered himself into the leather chair. I have absolutely nothing to discuss with a bitter, jealous woman who uses corporate technicalities for personal revenge. Period. Chloe is an innocent victim in Marcus's fraudulent schemes, he added. Chloe is many things, I replied, maintaining unbroken eye contact, but she is certainly not innocent. I reached across the polished surface of my desk and retrieved the certified medical laboratory report that Marcus had foolishly crumpled just minutes prior. I carefully smoothed out the wrinkled edges of the thick paper, ensuring the highlighted text was perfectly legible. With a swift, deliberate motion, I slid the hospital blood test across the desk. It glided over the smooth mahogany, coming to a complete stop directly in front of his hands. What is this nonsense? He scoffed, though his eyes instinctively dropped to the bold medical lettering. That is the expedited genetic screening from your new grandson's post-delivery blood panel, I explained smoothly. I authorized the private lab test this morning. I strongly advise you to read the results, specifically the blood typing section. Arthur frowned, picking up the document with clear reluctance. He adjusted his glasses, his eyes scanning the highlighted lines. I watched the precise moment his aristocratic arrogance fractured. His brow furrowed in deep confusion, his lips parting silently as he read the biological facts printed there. Marcus possessed type AB blood. Chloe possessed type O blood. The newborn infant possessed type O blood. This is biologically impossible, Arthur whispered, the paper trembling in his grasp. A man with a B blood cannot possibly father a child with type O blood. This document has to be a mistake. The laboratory must have mixed up the patient files during the transfer. Vanguard Horizon does not make mistakes, and neither do our partnered medical facilities, I stated flatly. That document is a certified, undeniable medical fact. Your daughter has been aggressively parading a child around high society, telling utter lies. In reality, she has been running a deceptive scheme that rivals Marcus's own financial fraud. No, Arthur gasped, dropping the paper. Chloe would never do this. She comes from a lineage of absolute substance. She would never jeopardize our family name by sleeping with another man. She did not just sleep with another man, I corrected, reaching into my pocket and pulling out my encrypted phone. She intentionally selected a man who could provide the specific physical traits necessary to maintain her elaborate illusion. I tapped the screen, opening the secured audio file my private investigator had captured weeks ago. I placed the phone directly beside the damning blood test and pressed play. The crystal-clear audio filled the silent office. Chloe's haughty, unmistakable voice echoed off the glass windows. Marcus is completely clueless, she laughed on the recording. He just bought me another diamond tennis bracelet yesterday. He is so desperate to prove he is a billionaire that he never even checks the credit card statements. Arthur flinched, recognizing his daughter's voice immediately. But what about the baby Chloe? Another woman's voice asked. What are you going to do when he realizes the timeline does not actually match up? He is not going to realize anything, Chloe scoffed. He is far too self-absorbed. Besides, the baby is going to have blue eyes just like Jason. Marcus has blue eyes too. It is absolutely perfect. Jason? The other woman asked. Your fitness trainer, Jason. Of course, Chloe replied, her tone dripping with smug, profound arrogance. Jason is gorgeous, but he is broke. Marcus is an arrogant fool, but he pays all the bills. It is the perfect arrangement. Once the baby is born, I am securing the Child Support Trust Fund, and then I will have Marcus completely trapped. Arthur Montgomery sat completely frozen in the leather guest chair of my penthouse office. The recording of his daughter's cruel, calculating laughter had stopped playing, but the echoes seemed to bounce off the floor to ceiling windows. His aristocratic face, usually a mask of impenetrable old money arrogance, crumbled into a portrait of absolute devastation. He stared at the certified medical laboratory report resting on the mahogany wood, then slowly looked up at me. The realization that his precious Chloe was not a victim, but a manipulative fraud who had actively participated in a massive deception finally broke him. He did not yell. He did not threaten me with his lawyers or the governor. He simply reached out with shaking fingers, pushed the blood test results back across the desk, and stood up. He looked 20 years older than when he had stormed into my office just minutes prior. I apologize for the intrusion, Ms. Sienna, Arthur said, his voice completely hollow, stripped of all its former bluster. The Montgomery family will not be filing any defamation lawsuits against you or Vanguard Horizon. My daughter's actions are her own. I will not allow her shameful behavior to further tarnish our family name. He turned and walked out of the heavy oak doors, his shoulders slumped in defeat. He was walking away from Chloe, leaving her to face the absolute wreckage of her choices in a public county hospital without a single dime of his protective wealth. Across the city, in a cold, windowless federal holding room, Marcus was finally facing the full magnitude of his spectacular ruin. My lead private investigator, Jackson, had arranged for a copy of the paternity report and the audio recording to be delivered to Marcus's newly appointed public defender. The federal agents later confirmed exactly how the scene played out. When the exhausted public defender slid the paperwork across the metal interrogation table, Marcus had initially scoffed, claiming it was just another one of my jealous, vindictive tricks. But as he read the undeniable biological facts, and as his lawyer played the audio clip of Chloe bragging about her fitness trainer Marcus, completely shattered. He dropped his head onto the metal table and wept uncontrollably. The golden boy of the Sterling family finally understood the true cost of his staggering arrogance. He had willingly destroyed his marriage to a woman who had silently possessed the capital and the loyalty to save him. He had embezzled millions, committed federal wire fraud, and ruined his entire family's legacy, all to finance a lavish lifestyle for a woman who was actively sleeping with another man and carrying another man's child. He had traded a quiet, genuine fortune for a pathetic, expensive lie. He was entirely bankrupt, publicly humiliated, and facing a decade in federal prison. The heir he thought would secure his status was nothing but a cruel illusion. He had literally lost everything for absolutely nothing. Yet incredibly, the Sterling family delusion proved to be a terminal illness. While Marcus was weeping in a federal holding cell, and Lauren was weeping on the dirty concrete floor of a parking garage, Vivian was actively refusing to accept reality. The eviction notices had been swiftly executed by my liquidation team. The banks had officially seized her accounts, and her designer credit cards were completely useless. She had been forced to leave her foreclosed mansion and check into a deeply mediocre 2-star motel on the outskirts of the city, using the last few $100s of cash she had hidden in her purse. But instead of contacting a bankruptcy attorney or looking for a job, Vivian was sitting on the edge of a stained polyester motel bed, obsessively focused on maintaining her fragile social standing. She had somehow managed to salvage her leather address book from the estate before the locks were changed. She was fully convinced that if she could just successfully host the upcoming annual African American Elite Church Gala, her wealthy peers would overlook the recent nasty rumors regarding her son's federal indictment. She truly believed that projecting an image of untouchable grace would magically restore her evaporated wealth and force her social circle to rally behind her. It was a staggering display of manic denial. The peeling wallpaper and the faint smell of stale cigarette smoke in the motel room stood in violent contrast to the lavish life she fiercely believed she was entitled to. She smoothed the wrinkles from her silk blouse, adjusting her stiff posture. Vivian spent her remaining cash not on food or basic necessities, but on premium postage stamps and heavy embossed cardstock. She sat at the wobbly laminate desk in her cheap motel room, meticulously handwriting VIP invitations to the most prominent members of her congregation and community. She wrote out the prestigious venue details, promising an evening of unparalleled luxury, completely ignoring the fact that she had absolutely no way to pay the catering deposits or the venue rental fees. Her singular focus was to ensure everyone who mattered would be there to witness her resilience. She wanted them to see her draped in her finest remaining jewelry, proving that the Sterling family could never be truly defeated. But she had one specific vindictive priority. She drafted a highly offensive, aggressively worded addendum to the gala's master guest list, which she quickly emailed to the church's event committee using the motel's complimentary internet connection. In the email, she explicitly banned me from attending the gala. She declared that Sienna Sterling was a toxic, socially unfit outcast who was entirely responsible for orchestrating a malicious smear campaign against her innocent son. She demanded that the security guards at the venue doors turn me away immediately if I dared to show my face there. She thought she was humiliating me. She had absolutely no idea that Vanguard Horizon had just finalized a massive, anonymous philanthropic donation that officially made me the primary financial sponsor of the entire upcoming church gala. The evening air was crisp as my chauffeur opened the door of my sleek armored Maybach. I stepped onto the plush crimson carpet leading into the grand ballroom of the Pierre Hotel. The annual African American Elite Church Gala was the absolute crown jewel of the city's social calendar. It was a night where the most influential families gathered to showcase their philanthropy, their pedigree, and their generational wealth. Massive crystal chandeliers cast a golden glow over the immaculate venue. Waiters circulated with silver trays of champagne, while a live jazz band played a smooth melody. Women draped in custom couture and diamonds exchanged polite pleasantries, their husbands discussing stock portfolios. It was an ecosystem built entirely on appearances and exclusivity. Tonight I was crashing their delicate, exclusive ecosystem. I wore a custom emerald green silk gown that cascaded perfectly to the floor, tailored to command absolute attention. A single flawless diamond rested against my collarbone, an understated yet undeniable testament to genuine wealth. My heels clicked softly against the polished marble foyer as I bypassed the line of guests waiting for the coat check. I did not need to wait. I owned the holding company that managed the hotel's real estate group. The heavy mahogany doors to the main ballroom stood open, guarded by two security personnel holding digital guest lists. I walked straight past them. They recognized me instantly from the confidential VIP sponsor memos they received earlier that afternoon. They simply stepped aside, bowing their heads in deep, silent respect. I paused at the top of the grand staircase overlooking the expansive ballroom. Tables were draped in imported gold spun linen and adorned with towering floral centerpieces composed of rare white orchids. The elite attendees mingled happily, completely oblivious to the financial earthquake that had struck the Sterling family just hours prior. They were laughing and drinking secure in their insulated bubbles. I scanned the sea of faces, my eyes searching for one specific, desperate woman. It did not take long to locate her. Vivian Sterling was holding court near the extravagant ice sculpture at the center of the room. She was clinging to the illusion of her shattered empire. Vivian wore a vintage silver gown pulled from the back of her closet before the estate was foreclosed. Her posture was rigidly upright, her chin tilted in that familiar, arrogant angle. She was laughing loudly, clutching a glass of champagne, and desperately trying to command the attention of a wealthy senator's wife. She looked like a queen ruling over a kingdom made of ash. She had spent her last dollars to mail out those VIP invitations, completely determined to prove she was still the untouchable matriarch of our high society community. I descended the sweeping staircase, the emerald silk of my gown trailing behind me like liquid glass. Heads began to turn. Conversations faltered. Whispers rippled through the crowd. The elite attendees recognized me as Marcus's quiet working-class wife, the woman Vivian constantly ridiculed. They expected me to be hiding in shame after the spectacular public arrest of my husband. They certainly did not expect me to walk into the most exclusive gala of the year, radiating absolute power and unbothered confidence. The sea of designer suits and couture gowns naturally parted, creating a wide, clear path for me as I walked directly toward the center of the room. Vivian was in the middle of a fabricated story about Marcus expanding his tech company into European markets when the sudden silence of the room finally caught her attention. She paused, her manicured fingers tightening around her champagne flute. She turned her head, following the collective gaze of the surrounding guests. Her eyes locked onto mine. The performance instantly shattered. The arrogant smile slid off her face, replaced by a mask of pure terror. Her skin turned a sickly shade of gray beneath her heavy foundation. She blinked rapidly, her chest heaving as she stared at me. She knew I had seized her estate. She knew I had bankrupted her son. She knew she was living in a cheap motel. Seeing me standing here, in her sacred social sanctuary, was her absolute worst nightmare brought to life. The guests surrounding her took a collective cautious step back, sensing the sudden dangerous shift in the atmosphere. "What are you doing here?" Vivian gasped. "I am attending a charity gala, Vivian," I replied smoothly, stopping just a few feet away from her trembling form. "I hear it is a wonderful event. The floral arrangements are particularly stunning this year." Sa. "You are not welcome here," Vivian shrieked, the panic finally overriding her desperate need to maintain appearances. She pointed a shaking finger at my face, her vintage bracelets clattering loudly against her wrist. "I specifically emailed the executive planning committee. I explicitly banned you from this venue. You are a toxic, socially unfit nobody who destroyed my son's life." The guests gasped collectively. Several prominent church elders exchanged horrified glances. Vivian had completely lost her composure. "I think you are confused about who holds authority here," I stated softly, keeping my tone perfectly level. Vivian frantically looked around, spotting the event security team near the entrance. She waved her arms wildly, her face contorting with manic desperation. "Security, get over here immediately!" She bellowed, her voice echoing off the vaulted ceilings. "This woman is trespassing. She is a hostile intruder. I demand that you throw her out into the street right this second. Escort her out now." Two security guards in dark suits began marching across the ballroom floor. Vivian offered me a triumphant sneer, believing her elite status would save her one final time. She crossed her arms, waiting for the guards to forcefully drag me away in front of the entire high society crowd. The two seasoned security guards halted, exchanging a rapid, nervous glance. Vivian continued to shriek her commands, her vintage silver bracelets rattling, but the guards did not reach for my arms. They recognized my emerald gown from the VIP sponsor dossiers memorized earlier. Instead of grabbing me, the taller guard bowed, took a deliberate step backward, and gestured toward the center of the room. He acknowledged my authority. Vivian stared at the retreating guards, her mouth falling open in unadulterated shock. The illusion of her untouchable social power fractured before her eyes. Realizing her aggressive commands were utterly useless, Vivian immediately shifted her strategy. She possessed decades of experience manipulating Los Angeles elite. She knew exactly how to play the room. Her furious posture collapsed into overwhelming sorrow. She pressed a trembling hand over her heart, closing her eyes as if struck by sudden physical pain. A perfectly timed tear spilled over her eyelashes, ruining her carefully applied mascara. "Look at her!" Vivian wailed, her voice echoing mournfully across the vaulted ceiling of the grand ballroom. She projected her voice like a seasoned actress, ensuring every wealthy patron, elder, and socialite heard her plea. Look at the woman who has mercilessly terrorized my family. Look at the monster who smiled in my face while secretly plotting to destroy my innocent son. The jazz band in the corner abruptly stopped playing. The clinking of champagne flutes faded into a heavy silence. Hundreds of eyes turned toward the center of the room, pinning us in a collective spotlight. I stood perfectly still, letting the cool silk of my gown brush against the polished marble floor. I offered no defense, allowing Vivian the necessary rope to completely hang herself. We took her in when she had absolutely nothing. Vivian sobbed loudly, turning her face toward a group of influential church elders standing near the floral arrangements. She stretched her arms out in devout supplication. We welcomed her into our blessed Christian home. We gave her our prestigious name. We treated her with charity. And how does she repay the Lord's kindness? By orchestrating a vindictive campaign of lies to send my beautiful boy to federal prison? A low collective murmur rippled through the crowd. I saw judgmental expressions forming on the faces of women who had spent years kissing Vivian's cheek at Sunday service. They were wealthy and instinctively protective of their own kind. To them, Vivian was a pillar of their community, and I was the working-class outsider infiltrating their sacred space. She is a bitter, broken woman, Vivian continued, her voice rising into a shrill, hysterical crescendo. She pointed a trembling, manicured finger directly at my face. She was ready to use the ultimate weapon, the cruel lie Marcus continuously fed his family to cover his inadequacies. She is punishing my son because she is completely barren. God closed her womb because he knew the darkness lurking inside. She could never give my son the child he so desperately prayed for, so she decided to ruin his life when he finally found a woman who could. The gasp from the crowd was audible and sharp. In these conservative circles, invoking a woman's fertility was a devastating, calculated low blow. It was the ultimate social humiliation. I heard the sharp whispers multiplying around me. How monstrous, an older woman in a diamond necklace murmured to her husband. To destroy a man simply out of pure jealousy, another socialite whispered, glaring at me with open disgust. The tide of public opinion rapidly shifted. She successfully painted herself as the devout matriarch, viciously attacked by a jealous, infertile ex-wife. Empowered by sympathetic murmurs, she took a step closer, her eyes flashing with triumphant malice behind theatrical tears. You could not handle the fact that Chloe was carrying the true sterling heir, Vivian cried out, pressing her hands together in a prayerful clasp. You could not handle the holy blessing bestowed upon my family, so you hacked into his accounts. You fabricated financial crimes. You drove us from our beautiful home out of pure, barren spite. You are a wicked, soulless creature. Sienna, and the Lord sees exactly what you have done. Is that why you are here? A prominent deacon asked, stepping forward from the crowd, his expression stern and disapproving. He looked me up and down, his eyes lingering on my expensive diamond necklace. To gloat over the misery of a faithful family, this is a charity gala, young woman. A place of worship and philanthropy. It is not a venue for your personal vendettas. I slowly turned my gaze from Vivian's tear-streaked face to the deacon. The entire ballroom held its breath, waiting for my response, expecting me to crumble under the heavy weight of their collective moral judgment. Cold peace settled over my mind. Vivian had played her best card. She had weaponized my supposed infertility, painted her son as a saint, and claimed the moral high ground in front of the most powerful people in the city. She truly believed her performance had successfully isolated me and preserved her precious social standing. I smiled. It was not a defensive smile nor an angry one. It was a smile of pure, lethal amusement. I smoothly unclasped the diamond-encrusted clutch in my hands. The satisfying click echoed loudly in the tense, silent room. Your devotion to your son is truly inspiring, Vivian, I said, my voice perfectly modulated, carrying effortlessly across the large ballroom without a single trace of a tremor. I did not yell or cry. But since we are speaking of holy blessings, true heirs, and federal crimes in front of your esteemed congregation, I think it is only fair that we deal in absolute facts rather than theatrical fiction. I reached into the silk lining of my clutch, my fingers brushing against the thick folded edges of the certified medical documents and the federal indictment papers I had brought with me. Vivian's fake tears stalled. The triumphant glint in her eyes wavered, replaced by a sudden, chilling flash of uncertainty. Before I could retrieve the damning paperwork from my clutch, the heavy screech of microphone feedback pierced the tense atmosphere of the ballroom. The agonizing sound forced Vivian to cover her ears, her vintage silver bracelets clattering together as she visibly recoiled. Standing at the edge of the elevated main stage was Pastor Thomas, the highly respected spiritual leader of the congregation. He held a cordless microphone in his right hand, his expression entirely unreadable beneath the harsh glare of the crystal chandeliers. Vivian immediately dropped her defensive posture and smiled eagerly, anticipating my complete public humiliation. She truly believed her spiritual leader was about to condemn my presence and personally banish me from the prestigious charity gala. "Pastor Thomas, thank the Lord you are here to intervene," Vivian projected loudly, her voice dripping with manufactured piety and absolute desperation. She took a confident step toward the stage, gesturing dramatically in my direction. "This bitter woman has violently trespassed into our sacred community space. She is actively attempting to ruin our beautiful evening of philanthropy with her toxic, baseless accusations. Please, instruct your security personnel to escort her out the rear exit so we may continue our holy fellowship in peace." The crowd murmured their agreement, awaiting the pastor's righteous judgment. Pastor Thomas did not look at Vivian. He did not signal the security guards. Instead, he slowly descended the wooden stairs of the stage and walked directly toward me. The profound silence in the room deepened, becoming almost suffocating as the elderly pastor stopped mere inches from where I stood. His warm, deeply lined face betrayed no anger, only a profound sense of awe and overwhelming gratitude. He reached out with both hands, gently taking my arm, a gesture of absolute respect that sent a visible shockwave through the elite attendees. Vivian gasped, her mouth falling open in sheer horror as she realized the situation was rapidly spiraling completely out of her desperate control. "Security will not be removing anyone tonight, Vivian," Pastor Thomas said, his deep, resonant voice echoing flawlessly through the ballroom speakers. "In fact, I must insist that our esteemed guest of honor join me on the main stage." "Guest of honor?" Vivian shrieked, entirely abandoning her carefully crafted facade of devout grace. "Pastor, you are terribly mistaken. She is an infertile, vindictive nobody who just sent my innocent son to federal prison." Pastor Thomas finally turned his gaze toward Vivian, his eyes flashing with a stern, unmistakable reprimand that instantly silenced her hysterical outburst. He guided me up the wooden stairs, allowing me to stand at the very center of the elevated platform, looking down at the sea of bewildered socialites. I kept my posture perfectly straight, my emerald silk gown catching the light as I looked directly into Vivian's terrified, pale face. The power dynamic had completely shifted, and the entire congregation was about to witness the absolute destruction of the Sterling family's fabricated legacy. Pastor Thomas raised the microphone, addressing the captivated audience. "For the past 6 months, our church community has faced an insurmountable crisis." He began, his tone somber, yet laced with underlying joy. "As many of the elders sitting in this very room are aware, the historic orphanage we sponsor downtown was facing total immediate foreclosure. We were drowning under a crushing $2 million operational debt. The banks refused to grant us any further extensions, and we were mere days away from watching hundreds of innocent, vulnerable children be thrown onto the unforgiving city streets. We prayed endlessly for a miracle, for a savior to emerge from the darkness and rescue our most cherished philanthropic institution from absolute ruin." The wealthy congregation shifted uncomfortably, many of them having personally ignored the pastor's previous desperate pleas for emergency orphanage funding. Vivian stood frozen near the ice sculpture, her mind frantically trying to connect the pastor's speech to my unexpected presence. "3 days ago," Pastor Thomas continued, his voice rising with powerful emotion, A massive anonymous corporate donation was wired directly into the church's primary banking account. The staggering contribution did not just cover the $2 million debt. It established a permanent, fully funded endowment that will safely guarantee the orphanage's financial security for the next 50 years. It was the single largest charitable donation in the entire, lengthy history of our beloved congregation. We were explicitly instructed to keep the benefactor's identity a strict secret until tonight. Pastor Thomas turned to me, offering a deep, respectful bow before handing me the microphone. "Brothers and sisters," he announced proudly, "please join me in expressing our eternal gratitude to the true savior of our community's children, the lead liquidator of Vanguard Horizon, and our primary gala sponsor, Ms. Sienna." The collective gasp that erupted from the elite crowd was deafening. The wealthy socialites, the influential elders, and the powerful local politicians stared at me in absolute, unadulterated shock. The woman they had just allowed Vivian to publicly mock, the woman they had cruelly judged as a bitter working-class outcast, was actually the anonymous billionaire savior who had effortlessly rescued their failing institution while they had tightly hoarded their own generational wealth. Vivian looked as though she had been physically struck by a heavy speeding vehicle. Her knees buckled slightly, forcing her to grab the edge of a nearby linen-draped table to remain standing. The vintage silver bracelets on her wrist rattled violently as her entire body began to shake. She had just spent the last 20 minutes loudly proclaiming my worthlessness, declaring me financially and socially unfit to even breathe the same air as her prestigious peers. Now, the very spiritual leader she had desperately summoned to cast me out was standing on a brightly lit stage, publicly declaring me a hero. The absolute irony of the situation was a delicious, intoxicating nectar that I savored with every single breath I took. $2 million! A prominent deacon whispered loudly, the staggering financial figure rippling through the crowd like wildfire. The attendees immediately began distancing themselves from Vivian, physically stepping back, to avoid being associated with the woman who had just profoundly insulted the church's greatest benefactor. Vivian was completely isolated, standing alone in a widening circle of judgment and deep societal disgust. I held the microphone, looking down at the ruined, pathetic matriarch. "You spoke earlier of holy blessings and true character, Vivian," I said, my voice echoing with lethal, icy precision. "You loudly claimed that the Lord closed my womb because I was a wicked, soulless creature. You judged my worth based entirely on my working-class roots and your son's pathetic, fabricated lies. But character is not determined by an inherited country club membership or a stolen hollow trust fund." I continued, my gaze sweeping across the silent, captivated ballroom. "Character is defined by what you do when you possess true power. While your fraudulent son was busy embezzling millions of dollars to fund his mistress's lavish lifestyle, and while you were desperately hoarding your last remaining pennies to print out fake VIP invitations from a cheap motel room, I was busy saving the vulnerable children you all conveniently chose to ignore. You have absolutely nothing left, Vivian. No money, no mansion, and as of tonight, no social standing whatsoever. You are officially expelled from the very elite world you mistakenly thought you ruled." I turned away from her trembling form and faced the captivated audience. The heavy silence in the grand ballroom was electric, thick with anticipation and the complete destruction of their fabricated prestige. I gripped the cool metal of the cordless microphone. My emerald silk gown rustled softly as I walked to the edge of the elevated stage, looking down at the sea of wealthy socialites and influential church elders. Pastor Thomas stood respectfully to my left, his hands clasped in quiet prayer. When Vanguard Horizon processed the anonymous donation to clear the orphanage debt, our financial analysts noticed a severe discrepancy in the primary church ledgers. I announced, my voice projecting clearly through the state-of-the-art sound system. A prestigious institution like this should never have faced such immediate catastrophic foreclosure. The math simply did not add up, so I initiated a secondary, highly classified audit of the entire church financial history. I raised my left hand, giving a subtle prearranged signal to the audiovisual technicians stationed in the balcony booth. The massive digital screens flanking the stage, which had previously displayed the elegant gold-embossed gala logo, flickered briefly. A collective gasp rippled through the elite crowd as highly detailed, heavily highlighted financial documents suddenly illuminated the ballroom. As you can clearly see on the screens behind me, the $2 million debt was not the result of economic downturns or poor community fundraising. I continued gesturing to the glowing bank statements. It was the direct result of a highly coordinated, systematic theft. Vivian let out a strangled, breathless sound. She lunged forward, her vintage silver bracelets rattling violently as she desperately tried to block the nearest screen with her own body. It was a pathetic, useless gesture. "Turn those off right this second!" Vivian shrieked, her face turning a blotchy, horrifying shade of crimson. "This is a private, sacred event. You have absolutely no legal right to display our personal information. These are church records, Vivian, and they belong to the public." I corrected her smoothly, pointing directly at a highlighted transaction from 3 years ago. "Let us look at the facts. You and your son Marcus served on the Executive Financial Committee for the Charity Fund. You had unrestricted access to the community accounts. And over the course of 4 years, you systematically drained $1.5 million from the orphanage trust." "Lies!" Vivian screamed, her voice cracking under the crushing weight of exposure. "We earned our stipends. We managed those accounts with total grace and dedication. Bank records do not lie," I stated flatly, echoing a truth that shattered her desperate defense. "You did not manage the accounts. You treated them as your personal piggy bank. Let us review where the orphan money actually went. You spent it all on your lavish lifestyle. You used the misappropriated capital to fund luxury European vacations, lease imported sports cars, and cover the exorbitant country club dues that allowed you to pretend you were wealthy." The crowd erupted in angry, disgusted murmurs. A prominent deacon, the same man who had questioned my presence earlier, stepped forward, his face pale with righteous fury. "Is this true, Vivian? Did you steal from the children?" Vivian backed away, hitting the edge of a linen-draped table. "It was a temporary loan. We were experiencing a temporary liquidity snag, and Marcus was going to replace every single dime once his tech company went public. We are the Sterling family. We gave you our time and our prestigious name. You gave them a masterclass in deception, and you stole from vulnerable children to finance your own arrogance." I countered, my voice echoing like a judge delivering a final sentence. "You took money meant for a grieving community and spent it on luxury vacations." I tapped a button on a small remote in my palm, advancing the slide on the massive screens. A new document appeared bearing the official seal of the federal court. "My legal team, in full coordination with the federal authorities who arrested your son this morning, has already filed a massive civil suit against you and Marcus for the direct misappropriation of trust funds. With the accumulated penalties and standard interest over the past 4 years, you currently owe the church approximately $2.3 million. Her knees finally gave out completely. She collapsed onto the polished marble floor, her expensive vintage gown pooling around her in a silver puddle of total defeat. She covered her face with her shaking hands, weeping uncontrollably as the reality of her inescapable doom crashed down upon her. There was no Lauren to call. There was no Arthur Montgomery to bail them out. "The district attorney office has reached out to my legal team this afternoon," I announced, ensuring every single person in the room heard the final nail in the coffin. "They are actively considering bringing severe secondary fraud charges against both you and Marcus regarding this specific charity theft. Your son is already sitting in a federal holding cell, Vivian. I highly suggest you save your tears for your own impending arraignment." The entire ballroom was completely silent, save for her pathetic, echoing sobs. The elite socialites who had worshipped her just an hour ago now looked at her with pure, unadulterated revulsion. The illusion of her generational wealth and devout moral superiority had been burned to absolute ash. I handed the cordless microphone back to Pastor Thomas, who accepted it with a trembling, deeply grateful hand. I had delivered the ultimate devastating truth, protected the innocent, and completely destroyed the monsters who had tortured me for 5 years. I turned my emerald gown sweeping gracefully across the stage and walked out of the ballroom, leaving the ruined Sterling Empire entirely in the past. My own sweet revenge was finally complete. They had nothing left. While I stepped forward into my new triumphant life, the heavy mahogany doors of the ballroom closed softly behind me, muffling the sudden explosive eruption of absolute chaos that immediately consumed the venue. The moment I disappeared from their sight, the polite, restrained silence of the elite congregation completely fractured into a deafening roar of outrage and disbelief. I paused in the lavishly carpeted hallway, allowing myself to listen to the beautiful symphony of their destruction. Inside the ballroom, the massive digital screens continued to relentlessly project the damning financial ledgers, casting a harsh, unforgiving glow over Vivian's crumpled, sobbing form. The wealthy socialites and prominent political figures, the very people Vivian had desperately sought to impress with her fabricated royalty, were now practically tripping over their own expensive couture gowns to distance themselves from her toxic presence. "This is an absolute disgrace," a prominent city councilman declared loudly, his voice easily carrying through the thick walls. "To steal from vulnerable orphans to fund luxury vacations. We cannot be associated with this family for another second." The murmurs of agreement were swift and merciless. The elite community turned their backs in pure, unadulterated disgust. Vivian remained collapsed on the polished marble floor, her vintage silver gown pooling around her like a discarded, dirty wrapper. She reached out with trembling, manicured hands, desperately grabbing at the hem of a passing elder's suit jacket, begging him to listen to her pathetic, fabricated excuses. He violently yanked his fabric away from her grasp, as if she were carrying a highly contagious disease. Pastor Thomas approached her, his face a mask of profound sorrow and righteous disappointment. He did not offer her a helping hand to stand. He simply looked down at the ruined matriarch and quietly informed her that the church board would be fully cooperating with the federal authorities and the district attorney's office. Vivian wailed violently, slamming her fists against the cold, unforgiving floor, realizing that her precious, carefully curated reputation was now permanently and spectacularly obliterated. There was no coming back from stealing charity funds on a massive digital display. While Vivian was suffering her ultimate public execution, another member of the crumbling empire was desperately trying to avoid the exact same fate. Lauren, who had somehow managed to sneak into the back of the venue hoping to leverage Vivian's supposed social victory, was now watching the undeniable reality of my total financial dominance. Her pale face was completely drained of blood. She quickly realized that the angry, disgusted mob of wealthy donors would soon connect her directly to the Sterling family's massive fraud. Terrified of facing the intense, judgmental glares of her former country club peers, Lauren hunched her shoulders, covered her face with her designer clutch, and cowardly sneaked out the back door near the catering kitchens. She slipped into the humid night air, frantically searching the dark alleyway for an escape route, painfully aware that she could not even call a luxury car service because her credit cards were entirely frozen. She was forced to walk for miles in her expensive heels, her generational wealth exposed as nothing more than a pathetic, elaborate lie. Miles away from the glittering, chaotic ballroom, the harsh reality of the situation was finally breaking Marcus inside a sterile, windowless federal holding room. He sat handcuffed to a metal table, shivering in his ruined designer suit, completely isolated from the luxurious world he had so arrogantly claimed to own. The federal agents had permitted him one supervised phone call before processing his formal transfer to a higher security detention center. Desperate, terrified, and grasping for a single remaining shred of comfort, he dialed Chloe's number. When the line connected, she did not offer him a warm, reassuring greeting. Instead, she immediately demanded to know why her premium health insurance had been abruptly declined at the county general hospital. Marcus, completely shattered by the certified medical report proving the newborn child belonged to her fitness trainer, finally turned his unbridled rage on Chloe. "You used me!" Marcus screamed into the plastic receiver, his voice echoing violently off the concrete walls of the interrogation room. "I embezzled millions of dollars for you. I bought you diamonds and penthouses. I ruined my marriage and destroyed my entire family's legacy because you promised me an heir. And you were sleeping with your broke fitness trainer the entire time. Chloe simply scoffed, her tone dripping with the same cruel arrogance she had once used against me. You were an easy target, Marcus. She laughed coldly. You were so desperate to feel superior to your quiet little wife that you believed whatever I told you. You are completely broke now, and I have absolutely no use for a bankrupt criminal. Do not ever call this number again. The line went dead with a sharp final click. Marcus slammed the heavy receiver repeatedly against the metal table, sobbing uncontrollably as the federal agents moved in to restrain him. He had lost his freedom, his fortune, his family, and his fake heir. I stepped out of the Grand Hotel into the cool, refreshing evening breeze. My chauffeur was waiting, holding the Maybach door open for me with a respectful nod. I slid into the luxurious leather seat, smoothing the silk of my emerald gown. The city lights blurred into brilliant streaks of color as the heavy car pulled seamlessly away from the curb, leaving the ruined Sterling family far behind me in the ashes of their own making. I poured a chilled glass of sparkling water from the car's crystal decanter, taking a slow, satisfying sip. My phone buzzed quietly on the plush leather seat beside me. It was a highly encrypted message from my lead investigator at Vanguard Horizon. I smiled, reading the urgent text. My enemies had been thoroughly dismantled, their secrets exposed, and their lives destroyed. But true corporate liquidators never simply stop at the destruction phase. There was still one massive, highly profitable piece of the puzzle left to claim. What is Sienna's final move? My final move was not a dramatic confrontation, but a quiet strike executed from the pristine sanctuary of my downtown penthouse office. The morning after the disastrous charity gala, I arrived at Vanguard Horizon precisely at 6 a.m. The Los Angeles skyline was just catching the golden light of dawn, casting a warm glow over the city I now financially controlled. I sat behind my mahogany desk, poured a glass of sparkling water, and opened the heavy liquidation ledger. With a steady hand, I signed the ultimate foreclosure directives. I did not just freeze their assets, I initiated the immediate auction of every holding company associated with the Sterling and Kensington names. By 8 a.m., the major financial news networks were breaking the story. The ticker running continuously on the television screens in my lobby announced the catastrophic collapse. It was a bloodbath in the markets for their few remaining public stakeholders. While I reviewed the morning market reports, the federal legal fallout was hitting Marcus and Vivian with the force of a freight train. Marcus had spent a miserable night in a cold holding cell, frantically trying to contact high-priced defense attorneys, who immediately hung up the moment they realized his accounts were completely drained. At 9 a.m., he was marched into a federal courtroom wearing a bright orange jumpsuit, a stark contrast to his usual imported Italian suits. The federal prosecutor formally indicted him on 34 counts of aggravated wire fraud, corporate embezzlement, and grand larceny. The judge, citing his severe flight risk and total lack of collateral, denied bail entirely. Marcus Sterling, the arrogant boy who had mocked my working-class roots, was remanded to federal custody to await a trial carrying a mandatory minimum sentence of 20 years. His mother did not fare any better. Federal agents arrived at the Peeling Motel where Vivian had sought refuge after being publicly humiliated and banished from the church gala. She was wearing the same wrinkled vintage silver gown from the night before, her mascara permanently stained into the deep wrinkles around her eyes. The agents did not care about her former elite status or her pathetic attempts to name-drop local politicians. They placed her in handcuffs right there in the dirty motel parking lot, reading her Miranda rights over the loud hum of nearby highway traffic. Vivian was officially indicted as a primary co-conspirator in the charity fund embezzlement scheme. The $1.5 million she had stolen from vulnerable orphans to fund her lavish country club lifestyle had finally secured her a permanent residence in a federal penitentiary. She wept uncontrollably as they placed her in the back of the armored vehicle, her precious reputation permanently reduced to a sensational, embarrassing tabloid headline. Simultaneously, my liquidation team was executing the physical seizure of the beloved Buckhead estate. I watched the live feed from my lead field agent's encrypted tablet. Lauren had foolishly returned to the massive property the previous night, breaking a window to bypass the deactivated security locks, desperately clinging to the delusion that her father's banking connections would miraculously save her. She was entirely wrong. At exactly 10 a.m., 3 heavy moving trucks pulled into the sprawling manicured driveway, followed closely by 2 local sheriff cruisers. The officers escorted a hysterical Lauren out the front doors. She was screaming obscenities, clutching a single designer handbag, and demanding to speak to the governor. My team ignored her manic tantrums entirely. They systematically cataloged and removed her imported Italian furniture, the crystal chandeliers she had purchased with stolen trust funds, and the expensive modern art pieces she had used to project her fake generational wealth. The Buckhead estate was legally seized by my firm, its massive brass gates chained and padlocked. The public disgrace of Lauren's family sent devastating shockwaves through the entire financial sector. The Kensington name, once a symbol of untouchable elitism and old money, became absolute poison. When the details of their hollow trust funds and fraudulent loan applications were exposed by Vanguard Horizon's audit publications, the banking community reacted with swift, brutal self-preservation. Her father's most trusted associates, the men who had attended his lavish summer parties and smoked expensive cigars on his yacht, immediately severed all professional and personal ties. They publicly denounced the Kensington family to protect their own fragile stock prices. Lauren's father was forced to resign from his prestigious museum board in absolute disgrace, retreating to a modest rented condominium under the crushing weight of endless civil lawsuits. Lauren herself was left wandering the city without a home, a car, or a single friend willing to answer her desperate phone calls. Her entire identity, built exclusively on a foundation of unearned privilege and cruel microaggressions, evaporated into thin air. I stood up from my desk and walked toward the floor-to-ceiling windows of my penthouse suite, looking down at the bustling city streets below. The air inside the massive office was cool, quiet, and profoundly peaceful. 5 years ago, I was a silent, dutiful wife, scrubbing floors and enduring endless cruelty from a family that believed I was entirely beneath them. I had allowed them to underestimate me, using their arrogant blindness as the perfect cover to quietly orchestrate their total destruction. I did not just survive their toxic abuse, I meticulously dismantled their entire universe. Marcus was permanently locked safely inside a federal prison cell. Chloe was left abandoned in a miserable public hospital ward. Vivian was facing decades behind bars for stealing from orphans. Lauren was a broke, desperate, publicly humiliated outcast. Every single dollar property, an asset they had ever valued, now fully and legally belonged to me. The ultimate revenge was not just taking their money, it was forcing them to live the exact working-class reality they had spent their entire lives mocking. I took a slow, refreshing sip of my crisp, cold, sparkling water, simply smiling at the beautiful horizon. My ledger was perfectly balanced and my entire life was finally mine to control. 2 days after the brutal federal indictments were handed down, I directed my chauffeur to drive past the towering wrought iron gates of the Buckhead estate one final time. I did not go to gloat, nor did I go to issue any further dramatic proclamations. I simply needed to verify that Vanguard Horizon's asset liquidation protocols were being executed with absolute precision. The massive brass gates, which had previously kept me locked inside a prison of elitist expectations, were now chained wide open by my own private security contractors. 3 oversized moving trucks idled on the pristine circular driveway. Workers in dark uniforms systematically carried out heavy mahogany furniture, imported crystal chandeliers, and priceless antique rugs. I instructed my driver to park the Maybach on the street just outside the property line, rolling down the tinted window to observe the chaotic scene unfolding on the manicured front lawn. The crisp morning air carried the sharp, frantic sounds of a family completely devouring itself. Vivian and Lauren, the 2 women who had spent 5 long years flawlessly coordinating their microaggressions against me, were now standing in the center of the driveway, viciously tearing each other to absolute shreds. Lauren's designer tennis whites were wrinkled and stained with dirt from her pathetic attempt to break into the seized house the previous day. She was clutching a single leather handbag, screaming at the top of her lungs. Vivian, who had apparently managed to scrape together enough cash for a cheap cab ride from her squalid motel, was aggressively pointing her manicured finger directly at Lauren's chest. Without Marcus or David there to finance their delusions, the two women had rapidly turned into cornered, desperate animals. "You ruined my sons!" Vivian shrieked, her voice cracking with pure hysteria. "If your family had actually possessed the generational wealth you constantly bragged about, Marcus would never have needed to borrow money. You lied to us. You paraded around my country club pretending to be an heiress, and you brought nothing but worthless, toxic debt into this family." Lauren let out a harsh, bitter laugh that echoed against the stone facade of the foreclosed mansion. "I ruined your sons. Your sons were arrogant, incompetent fools who ran a pathetic Ponzi scheme because they lacked the basic intellectual capacity to run a legitimate business. You raised a pair of absolute criminals, Vivian. You spent your entire life teaching them that they were untouchable royalty, and now they are both sitting in federal prison because of your toxic entitlement. Do not you dare blame my family for the spectacular collapse of your pathetic empire." They lunged at each other, their voices overlapping in a chaotic symphony of blame, denial, and venom. Vivian accused Lauren of being a gold-digging fraud, while Lauren mocked Vivian for facing a federal indictment over stolen charity funds. The sheer hypocrisy of their argument was a stunning spectacle to witness from afar. For 5 long years they had presented a flawlessly united front, weaponizing their fabricated social standing to diminish my worth and silence my voice at every possible turn. They had gleefully shared cruel jokes at my expense over expensive country club dinners, bonding over their shared delusion of inherent superiority. Yet without the artificial insulation of their stolen wealth to protect them, that powerful sisterhood completely vanished. They were violently turning on each other with the exact same merciless ferocity they had once reserved strictly for me. They hurled the exact same insults they used to reserve exclusively for me, but this time the targets were each other. I sat quietly in the plush leather seat of my vehicle, sipping a cold bottle of sparkling water. I felt no urge to step out of the car. I felt no desire to interrupt their violent argument to remind them that I was the architect of their current misery. There was absolutely no need for me to say a single word. They had built their entire lives on a fragile foundation of cruelty, deep selfishness, and unearned entitlement. And when that rotten foundation finally crumbled, they had absolutely nothing left to stand on. They possessed no genuine loyalty, no unconditional love, and no moral compass to guide them through the darkness. The moment the stolen money vanished, their fabricated family unity instantly dissolved into bitter, violent hatred. This was the ultimate realization of my vengeance. The true punishment was not the loss of their luxury cars, the seizure of their bank accounts, or the foreclosure of their mansions. The true punishment was simply leaving them alone with each other. I watched Vivian physically shove Lauren backward, causing the younger woman to stumble over a moving box that had been carelessly left on the lawn. Lauren shrieked, swinging her heavy designer handbag at Vivian's head. My security contractors did not even bother to intervene. They simply stepped around the two brawling women, continuing to load the seized assets into the waiting trucks. It was a pathetic, miserable spectacle. I realized then that sometimes the absolute best revenge is not an act of total destruction, but simply becoming everything your abusers explicitly said you could never be, and quietly watching them destroy themselves. They were entirely consumed by their own insatiable greed, completely blind to the fact that their arrogance had sealed their fate long before Vanguard Horizon ever audited their ledgers. I pressed the silver button on the door panel, and the tinted window smoothly glided shut, instantly cutting off the harsh sound of their echoing screams. "Take me to the downtown office," I instructed my chauffeur, my voice perfectly level and entirely at peace. "We have a hospital acquisition to finalize today." The heavy engine of the Maybach rumbled to life, pulling smoothly away from the curb. I did not look back in the rearview mirror. I left them fighting in the dirt, completely trapped in the miserable, empty reality they had meticulously built for themselves, while I moved forward into a brilliant, unburdened future. 6 months later, the heavy brass gates of the Buckhead estate swung open to welcome a completely different kind of guest. The sprawling property, once a fortress of arrogance and a monument to the Sterling family's fabricated generational wealth, had been entirely transformed. I stood on the manicured front lawn watching a group of women walk up the grand driveway. They did not wear designer tennis skirts or carry imported leather handbags. They were women who had survived financial abuse, women who had scrubbed floors to feed their children, and women who had been told their entire lives that they were completely worthless. They were women exactly like I used to be. I had officially converted the foreclosed mansion into the Vanguard Horizon Foundation for women. The massive formal dining room where Vivian used to host her exclusive country club dinners and ruthlessly mock my working-class background was now a collaborative workspace filled with computers and whiteboards. We provided comprehensive legal support, emergency housing assistance, and advanced financial literacy programs to help vulnerable women secure their own absolute independence. The wine cellar that Marcus had stocked with stolen funds was renovated into a secure daycare center, echoing with the sounds of happy, safe children. Every corner of the estate that had previously been dedicated to elitist exclusion was now completely dedicated to empowerment and radical inclusion. I walked through the grand foyer, tracing my fingers along the polished oak banister. The silence of the old regime was gone, replaced by the beautiful, chaotic hum of genuine rebuilding. A young woman named Clara approached me near the main staircase. She was a former waitress who had narrowly escaped a highly manipulative marriage, arriving at our foundation doors with nothing but a cheap duffel bag and a fierce determination to survive. Today, she was proudly holding her first approved small business loan application. She wrapped her arms tightly around my shoulders, her eyes shining with unshed tears of profound gratitude. I hugged her back, feeling the solid, undeniable reality of the work we were doing. This was the true value of capital. Money was incredibly useless if it was only used to buy expensive cars and intimidate those less fortunate. True wealth was the absolute power to systematically dismantle the barriers that kept innocent people trapped in miserable, desperate situations. As I walked out onto the back terrace overlooking the heated swimming pool, the crisp afternoon breeze washed over me. I took a deep, grounding breath, allowing myself a quiet moment to reflect on the turbulent journey that had brought me to this exact spot. 5 years ago, I was a silent, terrified girl, trying desperately to fit into a family that viewed my existence as a repulsive stain on their fake pedigree. They had systematically tried to break my spirit, isolate me from my own potential, and punish me for the profound crime of being born without a trust fund. They failed spectacularly. Their ruin was entirely self-inflicted, driven by their own insatiable greed and stunning incompetence. While they were busy clinging to a fabricated past, I was busy securing a tangible future. I had recently heard through the inevitable whispers of the financial sector that Lauren was currently working as a junior retail clerk at a suburban shopping mall, desperately trying to pay off the massive tax penalties her husband had accumulated. Vivian was serving her federal sentence, her precious reputation permanently obliterated in the highly publicized charity fraud scandal. Marcus remained locked securely inside a federal penitentiary, spending his days regretting the catastrophic lies that had cost him his freedom. I felt absolutely no pity for their current miserable circumstances, nor did I feel any lingering, fiery rage. The intense, burning desire for immediate vengeance that had fueled my initial corporate takeover had slowly dissolved, leaving behind a clear, unshakable sense of profound peace. I leaned against the stone balustrade, watching the sun begin to set over the rolling hills of the estate. The sky was painted in brilliant strokes of gold and deep violet. Looking out over the grounds, the anger that once consumed me felt like a distant memory. I had taken the very instrument of their arrogant pride and forged it into a powerful engine of societal change. I had proven that a working-class girl from a diner in Ohio could outsmart, outmaneuver, and outlast the most ruthless, entitled corporate raiders in the city. I had taken the very instrument of their arrogant pride and forged it into a powerful engine of societal change. I had proven that a working-class girl from a diner in Ohio could outsmart, outmaneuver, and outlast the most ruthless, entitled corporate raiders in the city. The greatest justice did not come from matching their toxic cruelty or engaging in endless petty warfare. It came from elevating myself completely beyond their pathetic reach. My encrypted phone buzzed quietly in the pocket of my tailored blazer. It was a message from Dr. Thorne at the hospital, confirming that the new pediatric wing we had funded was officially fully operational and ready to receive its first patients. I smiled, sliding the phone back into my pocket. The work was never truly finished, but the foundation was finally solid. I had secured my own financial independence while simultaneously lifting up the very individuals the Sterling family had ruthlessly despised. This was not merely a victory of capital, it was a total reclamation of human dignity. I turned away from the setting sun and walked back into the bright, bustling mansion. The shadows of the Sterling family were permanently banished from these halls, replaced by the brilliant, unstoppable light of women claiming their own destinies. I was Sienna, the absolutely undisputed lead liquidator of Vanguard Horizon, the sole owner of this estate, and the architect of my own unparalleled success. And my beautiful, unburdened future was finally beginning.